Hi, sweet beings. Welcome back to Wild Geese. I'm your host, Anna. And I'm in my new room. Come here. And look who I've got with me. This is Bonzo, named after the garbanzo bean. He's not really a fan of being picked up, but he's my new roommate. We're learning a lot about each other. I learned recently that if you are playing with a string with him and you throw it just the right way, he snorts. So that was important to me. But anyway, today's going to feel a little bit different than a regular Wild Geese episode because today we're going to talk about how to actually make money as an artist, which is a topic that I've avoided for a while. I've strayed from making content about how to make money because I feel like that is so ubiquitous on the internet right now, and it often feels really icky to me. And by no means do I feel like I'm an authority in this realm, but y'all voted for this topic, and I feel like I've been having more and more conversations with the people in my life about how to get creative with the work that you're doing, like getting to the point where you feel confident to kind of like fully make up a job for yourself that doesn't exist on job boards when the jobs that are available to you aren't working for you, or you're just not hearing back from the applications that you put out there, which I feel like is a situation we've all been in at this point. So really, I'm making this episode for the friends that I've had those conversations with, because I always feel like in those conversations, I don't want to be trite and just be like, do your own thing, go out on a limb, leave your 9 to 5, whatever, because it's just never that simple. But I feel like 9 times out of 10, the way that we've been conditioned to think about our careers is so narrow. There's like this very clear trajectory that we're supposed to be on when you're in the thick of job applications, or like going to a job every day that you hate and trying to like keep up a creative life outside of that job. I feel like it's really hard when you're in the thick of that to understand how possible it is to actually be the creative director of your career. So that's what I want to talk about today. I feel like I get DMs from people at least once a month that are asking like, hey, I'm an actor, a painter, a writer, whatever, but I'm working this job right now and it feels like it's taking up all of my time and energy, and I don't feel like I have any energy left to devote to what I actually want to do. How do you find the balance between a survival job and your creative work? So I want to do my best to answer this question, because at one point it was the number one question on my mind as well, and I always felt like it was a question that was evaded or not really addressed. And I understand why it's not addressed, because it is so personal, and not personal in a like, oh, you're prying way, but personal in like a, what works for me might not work for you. But the thing that has worked for me is building a portfolio career. And we'll talk about exactly what a portfolio career, like what that even means. But I also want to give you the background on my career, what it has looked like so far. And then we'll get into the actual how-to. So I'll have timestamps so that you can skip to that if that's all you want. But I'm going to try to have as many free resources as I can in this episode, because I remember when I was first starting out, I felt like all of the information was gate-kept behind a paywall. And it took me a long time to find guidance that I could afford. So I've done my best to consolidate the free, or at least more affordable, resources that really, really helped me along the way. First on that list of free resources that have been incredibly helpful to me is Opera, the sponsor of today's episode. Opera is the web browser that I've been using for months, and I genuinely think it is so much better than the default browsers I was using before. A few quick things that I love about it. Number one, Opera has tab islands, so you can group your tabs based on different contexts, projects, or themes. I can name and color code all of my tab islands, meaning my research tabs don't get mixed up with my shopping tabs, and I can easily expand and collapse tabs. This just makes it so much easier to differentiate work tabs from personal tabs, which is very important when you're doing the majority of your work online. They also have something called tab traces, which are these little underscores under the tabs that you've most recently used. The darker the underscore is, the more recently used it has been. I love this because it is so frustrating to get into the flow with your work and lose track of the tabs that you're going between. And just like it helps to have a nice aesthetic physical workspace, it also helps to move through a design that you love while you're online. That's why I love that you can customize the theme of your browser. And this isn't just colors, this is like animated backgrounds, browser sounds, shaders, and more. And my absolute favorite feature is the Google services in the sidebar, because you don't need additional tabs for things like your Google Calendar and your Gmail, things that usually are open all day for me. Now they're always just one click away on the side of my screen, and it feels much more intuitive and less cluttered. Click the link in the episode description to download Opera for free today. So when I was pursuing a drama degree, I remember getting very frustrated because it felt like no one was talking about how to actually survive as an actor. Like they were all talking about the craft of acting all the time, whatever, which is like great, wonderful. But there was this big gap in the conversation that was making the pursuit of acting feel kind of unsafe to me. Like, acting is particularly difficult not only because jobs are few and far between, but because you have to go through gatekeepers in order to do it. You have to be cast in something in order to act. Or maybe you're making your own work and you don't have to go through that process. But when you're making your own work, you're often investing your own money and maybe losing money in the process. So I remember being like, okay, I feel like I'm getting better at the skill of acting, but like, what the fuck? How am I supposed to survive as an actor? And sometimes alumni would come talk to us and everyone would have questions about like what it's like on set, things like that. And my question was always, okay, what's your survival job though? Because even you as a working actor have months without jobs and like you've got to sustain yourself. So how are you doing that like practically? And I never got two of the same answers. One person was a florist, one person was a bartender, one person did temp work. And I remember reading Jenna Fisher's book, The Actor's Life. And if I'm remembering correctly, she just kind of said, you need to have jobs that you feel comfortable leaving at any moment if a good acting gig comes along. And I really thought for a long time that like waiting tables and bartending was kind of the only option that was flexible enough to allow me to continue to go on auditions in the middle of a workday. And the thought of that being my only option was kind of awful to me because I was bad at waiting tables. Like I would often go home from my shifts and just cry because I was so bad at it. It did not work for me. It was really hard. And to this day, I'm in awe of service workers that are actually good at their job because holy shit, I was so bad at it. So the fact that I turned to more of a portfolio career situation while I was waiting tables reminds me of something that Lexi Merritt said. Lexi Merritt is someone I've had on the podcast before. I don't really know if she knows how much she has changed my life with some of the things that she's said. But something I've heard her say a few times is that entrepreneurship is an accommodation. I think for a long time, I completely wrote off the idea of doing my own thing because I didn't see myself as this like girl bossy entrepreneur. Even now, when people refer to me that way, it makes me incredibly uncomfortable because that's not how I see myself. But I have been making money online in a freelance capacity in what I'm now hearing being referred to as a portfolio career for like 3 to 4 years now. And that's not including brand collaborations. That stream of income is relatively new to me. But looking back, I think I definitely got into this type of work as an accommodation for me because other types of work were not working for me. Not because I saw myself as this like businessy girl boss person that was like made to do my own thing. I'm honestly not that great at businessy things. I'm sure there are so many people in the freelance space and business owners in general who would look at the way that I do things and be like, girl, you could be making so much more money if you just did XYZ. But my number one priority in doing this has always been making sure that I'm making enough money to feel comfortable and keep my creativity and my curiosity and my leisure alive. Because those are all things that I value that I think a lot of work environments crushed in me. So speaking of that, if you've been freelancing, building a portfolio career, making money online, whatever, this episode might feel very elementary to you. I'm sure a lot of people listening could actually teach me a lot in this realm. That's part of why I've kind of strayed from this topic in the past. But ultimately, I would really hate for my own feelings of inadequacy to stop me from offering up the information that I have. I will just disclaim this by saying that the things that worked for me may not work for you for many reasons. You may be coming from a totally different industry. There are things that worked for me years ago when I was first starting out that probably definitely do not work anymore because of the integration of AI into every single industry. I also do realize that many things I say in this episode, much of my story hinges on a level of privilege. I was able to take a few risks that I would not have been able to take if I was ever seriously afraid that I would not be able to pay my bills on the other side of those risks. My experience is very clearly not universal. The obstacles that I came across may be different than the obstacles that you come across. But I do want to offer up as many free resources as I can because I feel like the more people that are in work situations that feel like an accommodation to their values and needs, the more people that have access to time freedom and agency in their own lives, the better. The goal is to build a life where you don't feel like you're being splintered between survival jobs that are taking up most of your time and energy and like sparks of creative work that aren't paying you enough. And portfolio careers, freelance work, all of that are by no means a systemic solution. But right now, it's what we've got. These are options that I feel like not enough people have enough information about. So let's talk about what a portfolio career even is. I can already hear people yelling at me for having like 10 minutes of disclaimers before getting into it. But there are timestamps for a reason. Okay, so Anna McKenzie on Substack has an article called WTF is a Portfolio Career, and she kind of lays it out. She says, a portfolio career is defined as having several part-time jobs or multiple income streams rather than one full-time gig. In my mind, it has two defining characteristics. Number one, it involves pursuing multiple passions, interests, and types of work. And number two, it's never static and always evolving. To me, a portfolio career can be made up of many things. A part-time job, a part-time business, a done-for-you service, a done-with-you offer, a do-it-yourself offer, creative work, giving back, a mix of any of the above. I think of it as assembling various pieces of a career pie. Mine has taken many shapes over the years, with each version reflecting my values and needs at that particular moment in time. And that is exactly why I love a portfolio career. It can bend and change as your values and your needs change over time. If I'm in a 9-to-5 role with a clear set of demands, rigid hours, and like a clear trajectory to the top, I'm committed to that ride, even as my health and my mental health changes, even as my monetary obligations change, even as the demands of my schedule changes, even as the things that I value as a person changes, my 9-to-5 job is supposed to take precedent over all of those things. This is why when people ask questions about like work-life balance, I think it's not always tenable to stay in the situation that they're in, because sometimes the imbalance is inherent to the job. Unfortunately, though, of course, a portfolio career comes with its own risks. Not being a salaried employee most likely means that you don't have health insurance with your job if you're not from the US and you don't have to deal with that. God bless you. You also probably won't have reliable paychecks that are coming in bi-weekly like they would with a salaried job. You might if you keep a part-time job as part of your portfolio career in order to provide some sense of stability there, which is something I would probably suggest at the beginning. And just during times when business is slow, there is no shame in picking up a part-time job. And of course, you won't get perks from a company. Sometimes I hear what the full-time tech employees are getting, and it's like, oh my God. But I think healthcare is often the thing that keeps people in their 9-to-5 the most, even more than like the golden handcuffs of a high salary. Transparently, I pay out of pocket for marketplace health insurance. It's expensive and it's not that great. And that's part of the privilege that I have right now as a young woman who doesn't have dependents or major health concerns, knock on wood. Another thing is that as a freelancer, you are paying your own individual taxes and you are paying the tax of like your employer, which is you. I'm probably not explaining that very well, but basically you need to be setting aside 30% and you need to be paying quarterly taxes. I feel like I'm losing anyone in my audience who is not from the US right now. So that's all I'll say about that. It is very confusing and bookkeeping is very confusing at the beginning. But anyway, now that we've talked about what a portfolio career is and what the risks and rewards of this kind of work are, I want to tell you a little bit more about what this has looked like for me over the years. So right out of college, I was waiting tables in Texas. I had gone back home to Texas because this was 2020. So COVID had broken out. Everything was awry. Customers were not wearing masks. They were like laughing at us for wearing masks, even though it was legally mandated at this point. I was losing faith in my humanity pretty quickly, but I was fortunate that I knew some people from college who were working for this company that needed remote project managers. So I signed on with this company and I worked at the associate level for a while. I want to say it was like 1.5 years or something like that. And in that time, they offered me a promotion twice and I turned it down twice. This job allowed me to move back to New York City and do remote work, and I was very grateful for it. But I also saw that the people that moved up in this company were working literally all day long. Like they would start working often at like 7 a.m. and not close their laptops until 9 p.m. sometimes. And I was like, absolutely not. That is not the life that I'm signing up for. So in the position that I had with this company, it was actually quite an easy job. I had quite a bit of free time, but there's also something incredibly draining, even if you're not doing much, about a job where you don't care about what you're doing and you don't feel like you're actually really contributing anything. Like I technically had the time at this point to be creative, but I didn't feel like I ever had the energy. So when I was eventually laid off from that job, because of course I was turning down promotions. I was like very clearly not looking to climb the ladder. I went back to waiting tables. Again, I hated it and quickly started looking for an escape plan. Like I remember having a conversation with a bartender at a party outside of work and he was like, you are so different when you're off the clock. And I was like, yeah, well, I'm like severed from my real personality in this job. Like, this is not the job for me. So I had been seeing videos on TikTok from people who were saying that you could make money online as a virtual assistant since about 2020. They were talking about how you could work remotely, you could make your own hours, things that felt like, okay, I need that. And I finally felt like I was in such a desperate situation that I was willing to try anything. What I found when I started to look into it, though, was that the people who were making these claims about how much money I could make as a virtual assistant were virtual assistant coaches. So it became clear that they had a stake in wanting me to become a virtual assistant, because if I signed on as their client, they would be making money from my decision to make a career pivot. And that little added bit of context made me very confused and weary. But I did have one friend from college who had a brief stint as a virtual assistant, and I had seen her posting about it on Instagram. So I reached out to her, I had a phone call with her, and I was like, is this real? Like, is this a real job, or is this like a multi-level marketing scheme? What's going on? And she was like, no, it's real. Like, I made money from it for a while, but I burnt out on it. But like, it was good for a while, like it is a legitimate thing. You have to treat it like a business. So if you're willing to do that, then you should. And she told me about her experience working with virtual assistant coaches. So in my mind, I was like, okay, sounds like something I could maybe do. Maybe I just need to find the right mentor, like that sounds like the make or break thing. So I'll start putting aside some money to hire someone to teach me how to do this job. Like, I looked at it as like, if you got a job with a company, there would be a training period. This is just a job that I haven't been trained for yet, and I need to like pay my way into being trained. In other words, I was a dream target for internet scams because I was so desperate to get out of the job that I hated. And that is not to say that all business coaches are like full of shit. That's not true. There are some really good ones, but it kind of seems like for every good one, there were about 4 that were willing to take advantage of you. So whatever, I started putting aside some money to hopefully hire a mentor at some point. So eventually I got one of these virtual assistant coaches, and I picked someone who was newer to the game because they were cheaper and that was what I could afford. And I was kind of appalled, if I'm honest. Like, I mean, you could say that this is a you get what you pay for situation, but I basically ended up walking away from that experience feeling like I was kind of scammed out of my money, because what she had done was she had filmed like 30 minutes worth of instruction on how to be a virtual assistant. And then we had like one call together where I was like, okay, but like, what do I actually offer people, and how do I find people to work with? And she was basically like, well, do what you're good at and make a business Instagram account and start DMing people. I was like, what are you talking about? So that situation sucked, but I still had it in my head that I could make money doing this because I had that conversation with that friend from college who had. So I was like, this is a real thing. I just had the wrong mentor. So I started putting away more money to find somebody who could actually guide me in this. I started a business Instagram account where I was like making these janky little Canva graphics about what I could help people with. I was like, I can help you with copywriting, not even understanding what copywriting was at the time. And after a while, I finally found a coach that was actually helpful to me. And one of the first things that anyone will ask you if you decide to provide a service for other people in a freelance capacity is like, who is your dream client? So I was mulling this over for a while, thinking of like very generic answers that didn't really mean anything. And one day I was taking a walk and I was listening to Benchtopia. If you've never listened to Benchtopia, it has been one of my favorite podcasts and a big, big inspiration for wild geese. But I was listening to that one day and I just remember thinking to myself, I wish I could just work for these women. Like, I wish I could just work for podcast hosts like this. And I told my business coach that. And at the time, I had no idea how podcasting is a business in any way. I was like, it's a free thing that I'm listening to. How are these people even making money? Why would they need help? What would they need help with? Whatever. But I brought that to my business coach and she was like, okay, yeah, you can help those people. Like, let's think through what a podcast host might need help with. And we just started listing out all of the things that they might need help with, editing, writing show notes, managing guests, managing sponsorships, on and on. And one of the most valuable things that I got from the woman that was helping me was that she was like, yeah, you can do all of that. And I was like, no, I can't. I don't have any experience editing podcasts, managing guests, like any of that. I don't have experience in that. Like, I was a project manager before. I can do spreadsheets. And she was like, Anna, you can teach yourself all of these skills. Look up some YouTube tutorials, girl. And we sat down and thought through different like tiered packages that I could offer to people. And of course, I was not comfortable offering those things to people until I actually had those skills. So I went out and I found a course that would teach me a lot of those skills and give me a nice little certificate that made me feel nice and official, even though it didn't actually count for anything. But I was so scared. I felt so ridiculous telling people that I could help them with this thing that I had no actual experience helping anyone with. And I think having a mentor there to be like, hey, just because you don't know anyone else that's doing this doesn't mean it's not a thing that you can do. Just because you don't have experience with it yet doesn't mean it's not a thing that you can build experience in. That was absolutely pivotal for me, because in the past, anytime that I would have an idea like that of like, oh, I wish I could work for this person, or oh, I wish I could do this thing, all of the reasons why I can't actually do that and that would never work for me would flood my head before I could ever get to the next step. So having someone there, a mentor of any kind, that can push you a little bit out of your comfort zone and hold you accountable to your own desires is like huge. So I'm really grateful to that woman. I think it was money well spent, because I didn't know anyone else who was in the online business space. And I did feel like I needed some specific guidance there. But I also do think the guidance she was giving me was, even though my friends didn't have specific experience in the online space, was guidance that my friends could have given me too, if I would have legitimately invited them into what was going on for me. Like, I think so much good can come out of having brainstorming time with your friends that you trust and that you think are smart. I think we all have a lot more to offer each other than we think, even if we're in different industries than our friends. But I think if you're looking for a mentor in your career and you have some funds to invest in that, my advice would be to work with people who have free content and marketing that already feels helpful and like it's pointing you in the right direction, not the people who are trying to make you feel like you're at a deficit and they have some big answer that they're guarding behind a paywall. Because in my experience, those people are full of shit. Anyway, so I learned the skills that I needed in order to help podcast hosts. But then the big question is, okay, how do I like find podcast hosts that need the help and also will trust me enough to hire me to help them? And the way that I did that was I started by offering to help for free in exchange for feedback. And these free projects always had very clear limits to them. You know, it was like, I'm obviously not going to dedicate 40 hours of the week to a free project. Like, if I'm remembering correctly, I basically edited one episode for them and then wrote the show notes. And then they would give me feedback that I could use as a testimonial. And those testimonials became proof for future paying customers that I could actually do the job that I said that I could do. And I actually still work with one of the women that I did a free testimonial project for when I was first starting out. Like, she is my longest standing client. I think free work can be a very slippery slope. You have to be really clear about what your boundaries are, how long you're willing to do it for, and what you will get in exchange. It's just like artists can't work off of exposure and experience forever. Like, you've got to be pretty strict with what the boundaries are there. But it's obviously very hard to jump right into getting paying clients when you have no proof that you can get the job done. Now, to make a long story even longer, about a year and a half into doing this, I lost, I want to say like 3 clients at once. And I didn't really understand what was happening. They were all saying that it was just because they couldn't afford the service anymore. I now look back at that time period and I think the adoption of AI definitely had something to do with it. And usually losing a couple of clients wouldn't be that bad. Like, that's part of what is so nice about a portfolio career, like freelance work like this, is that you lose a client, it's fine. It's not like being laid off from a job. Like, you don't lose your whole income, you lose part of it and you just go replace them with another client. But I had not been very consistent with my marketing for a while. There were other things going on in my life. I was kind of losing the zhuzh with doing podcast production for other people. I knew that something was shifting and I didn't necessarily want to like double down and keep going in the direction that I was going, but I didn't know what I wanted to do next. Like, I wasn't ready to fully throw out podcast production entirely, but I also wasn't ready to like fully commit and like scale the business. So I decided to take on a part-time job as a receptionist while I was working with the podcast production clients that I still had. And sure, I lost some time freedom when I made that decision, but the security I felt from having a part-time position allowed me to start to feel like I had more room to take creative risks. And I brought Wild Geese back after quite a long hiatus. And then a couple months into the second season of Wild Geese, I started making money from brand partnerships. So then it was like, okay, I need that time freedom back that I lost when I took on the receptionist job. So I left the receptionist job and now I've got Wild Geese brand partnerships and I've got podcast production still going on for clients. Things have shifted a little bit with the podcast production side of things. I'm now doing less of the like technical editing stuff and more of the creative side of things, like helping people make decisions with their branding and writing and all of that. So that is the synopsis of my portfolio career thus far, but I hope you see what I mean, that it's really about allowing your career to change shapes as your life does, allowing yourself to be the creative director of it all and not outsourcing your decisions to one institution or one boss, but seeing yourself as the one that steers the ship. Okay, so let's get into the actual how-to resources section of this episode now that I've yapped about my own story for 30 minutes. Okay, so first of all, I want to go back to Lexi Merritt, who I talked about earlier in this episode. She has a Substack titled How to Make Money on the Internet, Part 1. And she lays it out very clearly with 2 internet money archetypes. Number 1 is the creator, and number 2 is the founder. The creator is someone who's making branded content for companies, whether this is through brand partnerships on their own page or UGC, which is like basically you're making content for the brand to go post themselves. And she says this, an influencer to me is a very boutique advertising/creative agency. This is why I'm neither surprised nor outraged when a content creator makes a shit ton of money. I don't compare them to someone with a 9-to-5. I compare them to Wyden and Kennedy. She says, like anything, being the creator comes with pros and cons. The reputational burden, to me, is the biggest challenge. Just personally, I think hinging your livelihood on whether or not people like you is an enormous ask, especially for a young person in her bedroom yapping into the void. Hello? So that's the first archetype. That's something that I stepped into in the past year and change, but I actually started as the second archetype, which is the founder. And Lexi says, in my eyes, you become a founder the moment you make and sell something directly to other people. And she gives a couple examples of the things that the people she works with have sold. So things like jewelry, albums, books, labor, websites, therapy, astrology readings, courses, workshops, writing retreats, yoga classes, Substack subscriptions, you name it. And you can be a founder who uses the internet to drive sales on all sorts of things, from like in real life services like haircuts and landscaping services to physical products to digital products. And then there are also online services. So things like what I was doing before, like podcast management, social media management, consulting, things that you can conduct your service digitally. And once you land on something that you want to do or provide for other people, you need what Lexi calls offer design. So what goes into offer design, to put it very plainly, is who it's for, why it matters, how it works, and what it costs. And sometimes making these decisions can feel like a shot in the dark, right? But like making decisions is a vital part of the creative process. It's something that I feel like is kind of barred from you in a lot of other forms of work when you're just an employee and you don't actually have the agency to make decisions over how things are working. This is your chance to take into account what kind of life you want and how you can give that to yourself while you're giving something else to your clients, your customers, whoever it is. Like, for example, it was really important for me to find something that was project-based instead of based on how much time I was spending on whatever I was doing. Like, I did not want to sell something that was like, you will have access to me for 20 hours a month. I wanted to be like, here are the clear deliverables that I will get you. And it doesn't matter how much time it takes me, because frankly, I think half the time, the amount of time that we allot to things is completely arbitrary. And a lot of the times when people are in their 9-to-5s, they're sitting there scrolling for half that time. Like, it's not actually taking that amount of time to get the projects that they need to get done, but they're expected to sit at their office from 9 to 5. It was important to me to find a situation where that wasn't the case, where I just had very clear deadlines that I was meeting, because I was always the person in school that like did not procrastinate my assignments. I just did them and sent them off so that I could have the rest of the class time to chill out and do what I wanted. So I knew that that type of situation would work really well for me. So locking down what you value in a work situation, what sort of workflow works for you, and who you want to work with. Again, going back to why I got into podcast production in the first place, it wasn't just because I love editing podcasts. It was because I love podcast hosts. Sometimes who you would want to help can be a really good hint into maybe the kind of work that you would want to do. I have pages and pages of old offer designs when I was working out my services on an app called Notability. Highly recommend. It's great if you have an iPad and you want your notes to be available digitally, but you're tired of typing at your computer. And they've offered my audience 25% off if you use the code WildGeeseNB and click the link in my episode description. But if you have truly no idea where you want to start with what sort of thing you want to offer, I would start with this like phrase that I've been seeing swirling around, which is expanding your surface area for luck. I think it can be easy when you don't know what to do next to get really quiet and narrow in on yourself. And instead, it is really helpful to start to reach out to people. So there's a book called Reach Out by Molly Beck that I remember reading years ago, which kind of lays out a framework for how you can go about reaching out to people every day that inspire you in some way. And I think this does two things. I think number one, it's obviously a great networking practice to get yourself in the practice of reaching out to people that you would want in your sphere somehow, and not always having the end goal of like extracting something from them, but just making little connections, taking matters into your own hands, not waiting until you get some party invite where you'll meet all of the people that you want to meet. But also number two, it just helps you become more attuned to the people that are doing interesting things to you. If you really start to track that over the months, you might be able to see a through line at some point. So Reach Out by Molly Beck is a great book to get into. You can definitely do this on your own, but also someone named Carly Valanci has Reach Out parties, which are these cohorts where she gets a bunch of people together who are doing it together, and they're like checking in on each other and kind of holding each other accountable to it. But once you have some idea of your offer design, what you want to do, what you want to sell, who you want to work with, there's probably definitely going to be some sort of learning curve when it comes to the tools that you're going to use to do that thing. So this is client relationship management tools, scheduling tools, invoicing tools, bookkeeping tools. Again, when you're working for yourself, you're doing the job of multiple departments. And I know I'm probably turning a lot of people off when I say that, but there are a lot of tools at your disposal, including YouTube tutorials. And here I would suggest taking it one tiny next step at a time. Most tiny specific questions that come to mind will have a very specific YouTube tutorial to save the day. So instead of looking at it as this like giant project of like, okay, I have to figure out my client relationship management tool as a whole, I have to understand all of its functionalities before I can start using it. You think to yourself, okay, I've got a person who is interested in working with me. I need to send over a contract and an invoice. What tools are available to me to do that? And then how do I use those tools specifically for that purpose? Latasha James on YouTube has amazing tutorials that helped me figure out how to use HoneyBook and different scheduling platforms. And I think she mainly helps social media managers, but a lot of her content is really helpful for anyone that's offering a digital service. But you can basically learn how to use any online tool or app on YouTube. And then as far as finding people who will pay you for what you're offering, you're going to need to invest some time in learning marketing and sales skills, or you're going to need to invest some money to hire someone else to do that part for you. I think this is where a lot of people can kind of fall into the trap of consuming content about how to make content about how to make content. And that often does feel very multi-level marketing scheme-y, even though sometimes it is genuinely helpful. It also can be its own sort of trap that makes you feel like the only way to make money is to make content in the exact same way as this other person is making it. But someone named Safana on TikTok makes incredible content about copywriting and has a lot of great copywriting reading recommendations. So I would recommend going to check them out. And I'll have all of these things, of course, linked in the episode description. But something to keep in mind when you are taking marketing advice online is that a lot of it is bad advice and a lot of it is outdated advice. It's like coming from people that succeeded 10 years ago and are still claiming that they know exactly how to get you to where they are now, even though the landscape is entirely different. What I do know, though, is that you don't have to have thousands of followers in order to reach people that need what you're offering. You just have to be strategic about getting your message out there to specific people. And I know this episode is running kind of long, so the last thing that I will leave you with is the idea of career experiments. Katie Doolittle on Substack has an article called How to Escape a Career That Makes You Feel Dead Inside, and she suggests this idea of career experiments, which I think comes from the book Tiny Experiments by Anne-Laure Lecomte, but she says to run 2 experiments. Experiment number 1 is the thing that won't leave you alone, the idea you keep circling, the one that doesn't make perfect sense yet, the one you would work on even if no one asked or paid you. For me, this is writing a novel. For you, it could be fixing up furniture and selling it. You choose. And then experiment number 2 is the thing you already know how to do, the skill people already trust you with, something you could offer tomorrow without reinventing yourself. If you're a copywriter, this would be writing copy for a new industry. And then she says, now here's the part that matters. Both experiments have to leave your head. Not a plan, not a mood board, not a note in your phone. tell someone, offer it before you feel ready, do it once even for free or for half your rate. The only data that counts is real-world data. And of course, this isn't the only way to do it, but that might be a fun place to start. And then the last resource that I'm going to share with you is a Substack article called Resources for When You're Done Climbing the Career Ladder by Hannah Goft, and she splits the article into 2 sections. One section is for people who are taking their first steps out of a 9-to-5 job, and the other section is for people who are building out multiple streams of income already. There's just a lot of great reading material and free resources there that might be a good place to start. If you decide to do this, I wish you all the luck in the world and all the best. I think we all deserve a work environment, work situation that doesn't crush our spirits. But that also doesn't mean that these options are the right options for everyone or that they're inherently better than being an employee somewhere. They're just options that I want you to have. I hope this episode was not information overload for you. I know it was a little bit of a different vibe than the regular Wild Geese episodes, but I hope you got something useful out of it. And I'll talk to you in 2 weeks. Bye.